This is Chris Maynor coming to you from the campus of Union University in Jackson, Tennessee. In this video, I want us to look at a problem that illustrates how economists commonly use the supply and demand model. You've seen some of this in some of the previous Khan Academy videos, but I wanted to go through another example of this. This falls under the category of what economists call comparative statics. I'll spell that out for you. Comparative statics. That's just sort of a fancy way of saying that we're going to use the supply and demand model to predict changes in a market. In this set of problems, we're focusing on the market for coffee. This is not the market for Folgers coffee or any other particular brand of coffee. It's the market for coffee. And so we're going to see 5 different scenarios, and we're going to analyze how each of these scenarios, how each of these situations would impact the market for coffee. Now, for each of these, you will see that I start with a diagram, and let me encourage you to do the same. Whenever you're using the supply and demand model, it's always good to take out a piece of paper, draw the graph, upward sloping supply curve, downward sloping demand curve, label your axes, price and quantity, and use the model. So in our first scenario, we're told that coffee workers organize themselves into a union and gain higher wages. Well, how is this going to affect the market for coffee? Well, this is going to affect the supply of coffee, and here's why. Coffee workers are an essential input or an ingredient in the production of coffee. And the wage that these workers are paid, this is the cost to coffee growers. And so higher wages mean higher costs, and this means that the coffee growers' ability to produce and sell coffee is diminished, and so we will see a decrease in the supply of coffee. The supply curve shifts to the left, say from S1 to S2, and this will take us from equilibrium A. This was the initial equilibrium price of P1, quantity Q1. This will take us to a new equilibrium price, we call that P2, and a new equilibrium quantity, we call that Q2. And so just by looking at the graph, not using any sort of intuition, not guessing, we can actually look at the diagram and see that the price of coffee has risen and the equilibrium quantity of coffee has decreased. When supply decreases, price of coffee rises and the equilibrium quantity will fall. In our second scenario, the price of tea declines. Well, in this case, tea, we know, is a substitute for coffee. Coffee and tea are both warm beverages. The price of tea has declined. More people are going to purchase tea at the lower price. And as a result, we're going to see a change, and in particular, a decline in the demand for coffee. As more people take advantage of the lower priced tea, the demand for coffee will fall, shifting it to the left. And our equilibrium moves from A to B. And new equilibrium price P2, new equilibrium quantity Q2. And so we see from the diagram that price of coffee falls and the quantity of coffee falls. In our third scenario, the Coffee Growers Association launches a huge advertising campaign promoting the benefits of regular coffee consumption. We'll see a change in taste and preferences. People will be attracted to coffee. This will increase the demand for coffee from D1 to D2. Equilibrium moves from A to B. This takes the market to a higher price and a higher quantity. So both price and quantity rise as a result of higher demand. You'll notice that when the demand curve shifts, that price and quantity follow in the same direction. An increase in demand raises price and quantity. A decrease in demand will lower price and quantity. This is an interesting situation. Due to a decline in demand, the price of Colombian-grown marijuana decreased. How does this affect the market for coffee? Well, remember, a large supply, a large part of our coffee comes from Colombia. And so now that the price of Colombian-grown marijuana has decreased, that means that the profitability of marijuana, we typically use the symbol pi for profit, the profitability of marijuana will fall. And so Colombian farmers will replace their marijuana crops, the land that they would normally use for marijuana. They will replace that with coffee and grow more coffee. And as a result, we will see the supply of coffee increasing from S1 to S2. Again, this is a supply change because Colombian grown marijuana is less profitable. Farmers will shift resources towards coffee. This causes the price of coffee to fall and the quantity of coffee to rise. Price decreases, quantity rises. And then finally, coffee prices are expected to rise in the near future. This is the one change, the one determinant in our list that impacts both supply and demand. As a coffee consumer, let's focus on demand first. If you expect coffee prices to rise in the near future, you're going to buy coffee now. Get it while it's at a good price. So the demand for coffee will rise. At the same time, if you're a coffee producer, you don't want to sell your coffee now. You want to wait and sell the coffee later at the higher price. And so we would expect the supply, today's supply of coffee, to fall to S2. Again, that's to postpone the selling of our coffee. Well, we have to be careful here. In this case, as we go from our initial equilibrium A to B, it's helpful here if you use different colors. You can see clearly the new equilibrium. Obviously, the price of coffee has risen. Notice this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. We expected the price of coffee to rise, and indeed it does. But in terms of the quantity of coffee, we're really unsure here. As I've drawn the graph, maybe there's been a slight decrease in the quantity. But really, depending on which curve shifts more, the quantity of coffee could rise, it could fall, it could even stay the same. So in this case, we know that the price of coffee rises. But quantity, we may say, well, we're unsure, it's indeterminate, it's ambiguous. We're not really sure what direction quantity will go. It depends on which curve, which side of the market is affected most, whether it's supply or demand. Again, I hope this has been helpful to illustrate how we use supply and demand, how we look at comparative static exercises, and no doubt you will see more of these in the future.